Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Vincent Torres sat rigid in the sterile hospital chair, his weathered hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. At 45, he carried himself like a man who'd seen too much of the world's darkness, which he had during his 15 years as a Navy SEAL before transitioning to private security consulting. His steel gray eyes never left his 17-year-old son Kyle, who lay unconscious in the hospital bed, machines beeping steadily around him. The accident had happened 3 hours ago. Kyle's motorcycle had collided with a delivery truck at an intersection. Witnesses said he'd run a red light at full speed, as if he hadn't even seen it. Vincent knew his son was reckless, but he was also an experienced rider who'd never shown such poor judgment before. Diane, his wife of 20 years, sat beside him, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. At 42, she still maintained the striking beauty that had first caught his attention when they'd met at a military charity gala. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, even in crisis, her designer clothes immaculate. Vincent had always admired her composure, but lately, something felt different about her, distant, secretive. "The doctors say he'll be okay," Diane whispered, reaching for Vincent's hand. Her touch felt cold, mechanical. "Thank God." Vincent nodded, studying his wife's face. In his line of work, reading people was survival. Diane was nervous, but not in the way a mother should be nervous about her injured child. There was something else, relief, fear of discovery. Kyle stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Dad," he mumbled, his voice weak from the sedatives. "I'm here, son." Vincent leaned forward, his voice softening, one of the few people who could bring out that gentleness in him. Kyle's unfocused eyes darted between his parents, then landed on his father. "Can you look at my phone?" The words came out slurred but urgent. "Please, important." Vincent exchanged a glance with Diane, who had suddenly gone rigid. "Where is it?" "Backpack." Kyle's eyes closed again, exhaustion taking over. Vincent found the cracked phone in Kyle's backpack. As he powered it on, Diane's hand shot out to stop him. "Maybe we should let him rest first. He asked me to check it." Vincent's tone carried the kind of authority that had commanded elite soldiers. Diane's hand withdrew. The phone's screen illuminated, and Vincent's blood turned to ice. The most recent text conversation was between Kyle and someone named Coach B, but Vincent recognized the number. It was Brett Hutchinson, a 38-year-old personal trainer who worked at Diane's gym. Vincent had met him twice at social functions. The messages painted a sickening picture. "Coach B, did you deliver the package like we discussed?" "Kyle, yeah, but I don't feel good about this, Coach B." "Your mom says you're mature enough to handle adult responsibilities, Kyle. What if my dad finds out?" "Coach B, he won't. This stays between us. Your mom is counting on you, Kyle. The money they gave me. It feels wrong, Coach B. You're helping your mom be happy. Sometimes that requires difficult choices." Vincent scrolled further back, his rage building with each message. For months, Diane and Brett had been manipulating Kyle, using him to deliver packages, carry messages, even spy on Vincent's business meetings. They'd convinced the teenager he was protecting his mother's happiness and paid him to keep secrets from his father. But the final message thread made Vincent's vision blur with fury. "Coach B, tonight's the big one. Your dad's overseas contract gets signed tomorrow, Kyle. Mom said after this, we might have to move away, Coach B." "That's right. Just you, me, and your mom. New life, new family, Kyle. What about Dad?" "Coach B, sometimes people serve their purpose, and it's time to move on." Vincent's hands began to shake, not with fear, but with the kind of controlled rage that had made him legendary in the field. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to take Kyle and disappear with Vincent's money, using his own son as their accomplice. "Vincent," Dr. Martinez approached, his expression grave. "We need to discuss Kyle's blood work." Vincent immediately called the attending physician over, showing him the phone. As the doctor read, his face darkened. "This explains the unusual toxicology results. Your son had traces of anxiety medication in his system, not prescribed to him. This could have affected his judgment, caused disorientation. Vincent turned to Diane, his voice deadly calm. Care to explain why our son had medication in his system? Diane's face had gone ashen. I don't know what you're talking about. The doctor continued. We're required to report this to the police. This appears to be a case of drug administration to a minor, possibly contributing to the accident. As Dr. Martinez stepped away to make the call, Vincent looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman he'd loved, protected, and built a life with had been systematically poisoning their son's mind and body. She turned Kyle into a weapon against his own father. This is unbelievable, Vincent said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of retribution. Diane turned pale, finally understanding that her carefully constructed deception was crumbling. But she had no idea what she'd awakened. Vincent Torres was not a man who forgave or forgot, and he'd spent decades learning exactly how to destroy enemies who threatened his family. The war had begun. Chapter 2. The Hunter's Past. Vincent stepped into the hospital corridor, his mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept him alive through 7 combat deployments. He needed information, and he needed it fast. First, he called his business partner, Tommy Rodriguez, a former Marine intelligence officer who now helped run their security consulting firm. Tommy, I need a full surveillance package on Diane and Brett Hutchinson. Everything, financials, communications, movements, associations. And I need it by tomorrow. Rough day. Tommy's voice carried concern. He'd never heard Vincent this cold. My wife's been running a long-term psychological operation against me using my own son. She nearly got him killed today. A pause. Jesus, you want me to bring in the full team? Not yet. Silent operation only. And Tommy? Start checking our business accounts. If she's planning to run, she'll need access to capital. After hanging up, Vincent walked to Kyle's room, where his son was now more alert. Diane had stepped out, probably to text her lover, Vincent thought grimly. Kyle. Vincent sat down, his voice gentle but serious. I read your messages. I know what they've been asking you to do. Kyle's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I'm so sorry. Mom said, she said you've been working too much, that she was lonely. She said Brett made her happy, and if I helped them, we could all be happier. What kind of packages were you delivering? Documents, photos, sometimes just notes. Brett said they were business stuff for Mom's new job opportunity. Kyle winced as he shifted. But today was different. They gave me these pills, said they'd help me stay calm during the delivery. I felt weird riding home, like everything was moving too slow. Vincent's jaw tightened. They'd drugged his son to make him compliant, nearly killing him in the process. Kyle, everything they told you is a lie. Your mother and Brett have been planning to steal from our family and disappear. But Mom said, your mother and I are getting divorced. Vincent's voice was matter of fact. What I need to know is, are you with me or with him? Kyle didn't hesitate. With you, Dad. Always. Vincent nodded, a cold smile playing at his lips. He'd raised Kyle to value loyalty and truth, qualities that would serve them both well in what was coming. Later that evening, Vincent sat in his home office, a converted bunker he'd built in the basement, surrounded by the tools of his trade. Multiple monitors displayed surveillance feeds, encrypted communication channels, and financial tracking systems. This room had coordinated operations across 3 continents. Tonight, it would coordinate the destruction of 2 people who'd betrayed his family. Tommy arrived with a thick folder. You're not going to like this. Vincent opened the file to find a year's worth of evidence. Diane and Brett had been planning this for 11 months. They've been slowly transferring small amounts from joint accounts into overseas holdings. More disturbing, they've been documenting Vincent's business dealings, client information, and even personal habits. Brett had military training too. He'd been discharged from the Army for inappropriate conduct with subordinates' families. They're not just stealing money, Tommy observed. They're building a complete intelligence package on you. This looks like preparation for blackmail, or worse. Vincent's mind raced through possibilities. His consulting work involved protecting high-profile clients, politicians, executives, foreign nationals. That information in the wrong hands could destroy lives, end careers, even start wars. The final document in the folder made Vincent's blood boil. It was a psychological evaluation Brett had commissioned on Kyle, describing him as malleable and ideal for long-term manipulation. They hadn't just used Kyle, they'd studied him like a lab rat. Vincent opened his secure communications system and began making calls. First to Marcus Chun, a former CIA operative who specialized in making people disappear, not physically, but financially and digitally. Then to Isabella Santos, a forensic psychologist who understood how to dismantle someone's mental defenses. Finally, to David Kim, a lawyer whose specialty was creative interpretations of justice. "Gentlemen, lady," Vincent said when they were all on the secure conference call, "I have a problem that requires the kind of solution we use to provide for national security." As Vincent outlined the situation, he watched his team's expressions grow darker. These weren't just business associates. They were the closest thing to family he had outside Kyle. They'd all lost people to betrayal before, and they understood the stakes. "What's the objective?" Marcus asked. "Total destruction. Financial, social, psychological. I want them to understand what happens when you betray a Torres. And I want everyone else to see it too." "Timeline?" Isabella inquired. 2 weeks. Diane thinks she's got me fooled, and Brett thinks he's untouchable. I'm going to let them think they're winning right up until the moment I destroy them completely. Vincent looked at Kyle's medical chart, thinking about his son lying in that hospital bed because of their greed and manipulation. Some might call what he was planning excessive. Vincent called it proportional response. The hunters had become the hunted, and they had no idea what was coming for them. Chapter 3. The Web Titans. Over the next 3 days, Vincent played the role of the concerned husband and father perfectly. He brought Diane flowers, held her hand during Kyle's medical consultations, and even suggested they take a weekend trip once Kyle was released. All the while, his team was systematically dismantling the lives of his wife and her lover. "You're being so wonderful," Diane said as they sat in Kyle's room on Thursday morning. "I know this has been hard on you too." "We're family," Vincent replied, squeezing her hand while noting how she flinched at the word family. "We get through things together." What Diane didn't know was that every conversation was being recorded. Marcus had installed microsurveillance throughout their house, Diane's car, and even Brett's apartment. Vincent now knew that they planned to execute their final theft on Sunday, the day Kyle was scheduled to be released from the hospital. Kyle had become Vincent's secret weapon. The teenager, disgusted by how he'd been manipulated, was now feeding false information back to his mother and Brett. When Diane asked about Vincent's mood, Kyle reported that his father seemed really stressed about work and not paying attention to anything else. When Brett texted Kyle about Vincent's overseas contract, Kyle confirmed it was definitely happening Monday instead of the actual signing date of Friday. The psychological profile Isabella had created on Diane and Brett was fascinating. Diane, despite her outward confidence, was deeply insecure and addicted to validation. She convinced herself that Vincent's work took precedence over their marriage, justifying her affair and theft as taking what she deserved. Brett, meanwhile, was a textbook narcissist who enjoyed manipulating younger, vulnerable people. He'd been doing this for years. Kyle wasn't his first victim. "They're both fundamentally weak," Isabella reported during their Wednesday night briefing. "Diane needs constant reassurance, and Brett needs to feel powerful. When that support system disappears, they'll turn on each other." David Kim had been busy with legal preparations. "I've documented everything for the divorce proceedings. With the evidence of child endangerment, drug administration, and financial fraud, she'll be lucky to get supervised visitation with Kyle." Brett's looking at serious criminal charges. But Vincent wanted more than legal victories. He wanted them to feel the same helplessness and betrayal they'd inflicted on Kyle. Friday morning brought the first phase of Vincent's counterattack. Brett arrived at the gym to find his employment terminated and his personal training certifications suspended pending investigation. The investigation, triggered by an anonymous tip about inappropriate relationships with clients' families, would find the financial records Marcus had carefully planted, showing Brett had been embezzling membership fees. Diane came home that afternoon furious. Brett got fired. They're saying he was stealing money, but that's impossible. That's terrible, Vincent said, maintaining his concerned husband facade. Maybe there's been some mistake. It has to be. Brett would never. Diane caught herself before admitting too much familiarity with Brett's character. What Diane didn't know was that the anonymous tip had come with a carefully constructed digital trail suggesting the information came from a rival personal trainer jealous of Brett's success. Brett would never suspect Vincent was behind it. That evening, Vincent received a text from Kyle. Mom's really upset. She keeps calling Brett, but he's not answering. She asked me if I've noticed you acting suspicious. Vincent smiled. Phase 2 was already beginning. The stress of their plan falling apart would make them desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. Saturday brought more pressure. Diane discovered that several of their joint accounts had been frozen due to suspicious activity. Another Marcus special, using legitimate banking security protocols to create seemingly random obstacles. When Diane called the bank, she was told it was routine and would be resolved in 3 to 5 business days. This is unbelievable, she told Vincent. Everything's going wrong at once. Don't worry, Vincent replied, wrapping his arms around her in what looked like comfort but felt like a predator sizing up prey. These things happen. We'll figure it out. That night, Kyle reported more intelligence. Mom's really scared now. She keeps mentioning having to change plans. She asked me if I'd ever want to live somewhere else, maybe with her and a friend. Vincent's anger burned cold and bright. Even after everything, she was still planning to manipulate Kyle into leaving with them. The teenage boy had been through enough trauma. Vincent wouldn't let them put him through an ugly custody battle too. Sunday morning, Vincent made his move. He sent a single text to Brett. Meet me at Riverside Park, 2 p.m. Come alone. We need to talk about Kyle. The message came from a burner phone registered to a fake identity, one of many Vincent maintained for his consulting work. Brett would be curious enough to come, especially if he thought Vincent suspected something but didn't have proof. At the same time, Vincent sent an anonymous package to Diane's office containing printed screenshots of Brett's text conversations with 3 other married women whose husbands were Brett's personal training clients. Marcus had spent days crafting these false conversations using Brett's real phone patterns and the women's actual numbers, creating evidence that Brett had been running multiple simultaneous affairs. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. By Sunday afternoon, Diane thought Brett was a serial manipulator who'd been using her, while Brett thought Vincent might know about the affair, but not the theft. Both were operating from incomplete information, making decisions based on fear rather than facts. As Vincent prepared for his meeting with Brett, he reflected on how far they'd all fallen. 3 days ago, he'd been a loyal husband and father. Now he was orchestrating the systematic destruction of 2 people who'd betrayed his family. But Vincent Torres had learned long ago that some actions couldn't be forgiven or forgotten. His wife and her lover had crossed a line when they endangered Kyle. Everything that happened next was simply the consequence of that choice. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Trap Springs. Vincent arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early, positioning himself with clear sight lines and multiple exit routes. Old habits from military operations. Brett Hutchinson walked into the clearing at exactly 2 p.m., his confident swagger betraying none of the pressure Vincent knew he was under. Vincent, Brett called out, maintaining distance. Thanks for meeting me. I figured we should clear the air about some things. Vincent studied the man who'd been manipulating his son for months. Brett was physically impressive, 6'2", muscular build, the kind of presence that attracted people like Diane who mistook physical dominance for strength. But Vincent saw what his wife had missed. The nervous energy of someone who'd built his life on manipulation rather than genuine capability. You're sleeping with my wife, Vincent said without preamble. You've been using my son as your errand boy, and you've been planning to rob me blind. Brett's composure cracked for just a moment before reforming. I think there's been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Vincent interrupted, is yours. You thought you were playing against some corporate executive who wouldn't fight back. But you picked the wrong family, Brett. Vincent pulled out his phone and played one of the recorded conversations from Brett's apartment. Him and Diane planning to disappear with Vincent's money after the overseas contract was signed. Brett's face went white as he heard his own voice discussing how to neutralize Vincent's ability to track them. That's impossible, Brett stammered. How did you? I spent 15 years hunting terrorists in places you couldn't find on a map, Vincent replied calmly. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when enemies got into my house? Brett's fight-or-flight response was kicking in. Vincent could see him calculating distances, exits, whether he could overpower the older man. It was almost amusing. Brett had no idea that Vincent had killed trained soldiers with his bare hands. Look, Vincent, maybe we can work something out, Brett said, his voice taking on the manipulative tone he'd used with Kyle. Diane and I, it just happened. These things are complicated. Vincent moved faster than Brett could process, closing the distance and grabbing the younger man's throat with just enough pressure to make breathing difficult. Did you give my son drugs before he got on that motorcycle? It was just anxiety medication, Brett gasped, to keep him calm during... Vincent's grip tightened. My son almost died because you needed him compliant for your theft. That makes you responsible for attempted murder of a minor. You can't prove anything, Brett wheezed. Vincent released him and stepped back, smiling coldly. I don't need to prove anything, Brett. I just need to destroy you. He showed Brett his phone screen, which displayed a live feed from inside Brett's apartment. Marcus had placed cameras everywhere, capturing Brett's illegal activities with multiple clients' families, his drug dealing to maintain control over victims, and his detailed plans to blackmail Vincent with stolen business information. That footage gets uploaded to a public server in exactly 6 hours, Vincent said. Unless you do exactly what I tell you. Brett straightened his shirt, tried to regain some dignity. What do you want? First, you gotta call Diane and tell her the plan has changed. You're leaving town immediately because the police are investigating the gym situation. Second, you're going to transfer every penny you've stolen back to my accounts. Third, you're going to disappear and never contact my family again. And if I don't, Vincent's smile turned predatory. Then I release everything. The affairs, the drugs, the theft, the child endangerment. Your military record gets reopened and investigated. Your family finds out what you've become. And that's just the legal consequences. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. But if you ever come near my son again, Brett, I'll handle this the way I used to handle threats overseas. Do you understand? Brett nodded, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Vincent had broken him psychologically without laying a serious hand on him, the mark of a true professional. As Brett stumbled away, Vincent felt no satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Diane's betrayal cut deeper than Brett's manipulation. She'd endangered their son, violated 20 years of marriage, and tried to steal the life Vincent had built for their family. Her punishment would be more elaborate, more personal, and far more devastating. Vincent drove home to find Diane pacing anxiously in their living room. Brett called, she said immediately. He says he has to leave town, that the police investigation is getting serious. Vincent, I'm scared. Vincent wrapped his arms around her, feeling her body shake with fear and guilt. What aren't you telling me, Diane? She pulled back, searching his face for signs of suspicion. Nothing. Brett's been a good friend, and I'm worried about him. The lie hung in the air between them. Vincent felt a cold rage settle in his chest. Not the hot anger of discovery, but the calculating fury of a predator who'd cornered his prey. I have to make some business calls, he said, kissing her forehead. Kyle's being released tomorrow, so let's plan a nice family dinner. As Vincent walked to his office, Diane called after him. Vincent, do you think we're okay? Our family, I mean. Vincent turned back, his expression perfectly neutral. I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be, Diane. Everything's going according to plan. If she'd been paying attention, she might have noticed the double meaning in his words. But Diane was too consumed by her own guilt and fear to recognize the threat standing 3 feet away from her. Tomorrow, Kyle would come home, and then Vincent would show his wife what happened to people who betrayed the Torres family. Chapter 5. Psychological warfare. Monday afternoon, Vincent and Diane brought Kyle home from the hospital. Their son moved carefully, his left arm still in a sling from the accident, but his eyes were alert and determined. As they settled him into the living room, Vincent caught Kyle's almost imperceptible nod, their agreed signal that he was ready to play his part in the final phase. "I'm so glad you're home," Diane said, fussing over Kyle's pillows. "I was so worried about you." "Thanks, Mom," Kyle replied, but Vincent noticed the slight distance in his voice. His son was an exceptional actor when motivated. That evening, Vincent initiated what Isabella Santos had termed controlled psychological pressure. He began asking seemingly innocent questions during dinner, each one designed to increase Diane's paranoia. "Diane, did you know the bank called about some unusual account activity?" Vincent mentioned casually while passing the salad. "Apparently, someone's been monitoring our financial patterns." Diane's fork clinked against her plate. "What kind of monitoring?" "They wouldn't say specifically. Something about federal oversight due to my government contracts." Vincent kept his tone conversational. "They asked if we'd shared our account information with anyone recently." "Of course not," Diane said quickly. "Who would we share that with?" Vincent shrugged. "I can't think of anyone. It's probably just routine." Kyle played his part perfectly, looking confused. "Mom, didn't you say you were helping someone with their finances recently?" "That personal trainer guy." "Brett," Diane corrected automatically, then caught herself. No, I never. We just talked about general fitness payment plans." Vincent filed away her slip. Even under pressure, she was trying to protect Brett's identity, right up until the moment she realized he'd abandoned her. After dinner, Vincent excused himself to take a business call that was actually a briefing with his team. Tommy Rodriguez reported that Brett had indeed fled the state, driving toward Mexico with what little money he had left. Marcus had been tracking his movements through compromised credit cards and cell phone signals. "He's scared," Tommy observed. "Keeps looking over his shoulder, changing routes randomly. He knows he's being watched, but doesn't know by whom." "Good," Vincent replied. "Let him run. The farther he gets from my family, the better." What about Diane's psychological state? Isabella Santos had been analyzing the surveillance footage of Diane's behavior over the past week. She's approaching a breaking point. Loss of control, abandonment by her co-conspirator, and increasing suspicion from you. She'll either confess or attempt something desperate within the next 48 hours. Vincent preferred confession. It would make the divorce proceedings cleaner and give Kyle closure about his mother's betrayal. But he was prepared for desperation too. Tuesday morning brought Vincent's masterstroke. He announced at breakfast that he'd be working late that evening, giving Diane an opportunity to panic about Brett's disappearance. Then he had Marcus send Diane a series of untraceable text messages designed to look like they came from Brett. "Had to run. Police getting close. You're on your own. Don't contact me again. This is over. Find another plan. I'm not going down for your husband's money." Vincent watched from his home office security monitors as Diane received each message. Her face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally despair. She tried calling Brett 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. By evening, Diane was frantic. She cornered Kyle in his room, not knowing Vincent had installed additional surveillance there. "Kyle, sweetheart, I need to ask you something important," Diane said, sitting on his bed. "If something happened to Dad and me, if we had to go away for a while, would you want to come with me?" Kyle looked at his mother with perfectly crafted confusion. "What do you mean, Mom? Why would something happen to Dad?" Sometimes adults have to make difficult choices, and I want to make sure you'd be okay." "I want to stay with Dad," Kyle said simply. "He's always been there for me." Vincent watched Diane's face crumble through the monitor. Her son, the boy she'd manipulated and endangered, was choosing his father over her. The psychological impact was devastating. That night, Diane made her desperate play. She attempted to access Vincent's personal safe, not knowing it was equipped with biometric locks and silent alarms. Vincent's security system recorded everything as she tried various combinations, growing increasingly frantic when nothing worked. Finally, she broke down and called the one number she thought might help: Brett's emergency contact, which was actually a forwarding service Marcus had created. When she poured out her fears about Vincent acting suspicious and begged for help escaping with Kyle, she was confessing everything to a recording device that would be used in court. Vincent appeared in the doorway of his study as Diane hung up the phone. "Working late?" he asked quietly. Diane spun around, guilt written across her face. "I couldn't sleep. I was just checking on the house security." "Were you?" Vincent stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Or were you trying to access my safe?" The color drained from Diane's face. "Vincent, I can explain." "Can you?" His voice carried the same deadly calm he'd used with Brett. "Can you explain why you've been stealing from our family? Can you explain why you drugged our son? Can you explain why you were planning to disappear with my money and Kyle?" Diane's legs gave out as she collapsed into a chair. "How long have you known?" "Since the hospital." Kyle's phone was very enlightening. "Kyle knows." The betrayal in her voice was almost comical. A woman who'd manipulated her son for months was hurt that he'd chosen honesty with his father. Vincent sat across from her, his expression cold and analytical. "Kyle knows everything, Diane. How you used him, how you endangered him, how you were planning to steal his inheritance and drag him away from his home." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Diane whispered. "We were just going to take enough to start over." Brett said a lot of things, right up until he ran away and left you to face the consequences alone. Vincent pulled out his phone and played the recording of Diane's conversation with the forwarding service. As she listened to her own voice begging for help to escape with Vincent's money and Kyle, her face went from white to green. 20 years, Diane," Vincent said when the recording ended. 20 years of marriage, and this is what you choose. Not counseling, not honest conversation. Theft, manipulation, and child endangerment. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I made terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over." Vincent's laugh was harsh and bitter. "There's no we anymore. There's no starting over. You crossed a line when you involved Kyle, and now you live with the consequences." He stood up, looking down at the woman who'd shared his life for 2 decades. "Tomorrow morning, you'll pack a bag and leave this house. David Kim will contact you about divorce proceedings. You'll have supervised visitation with Kyle if he chooses to see you, which, given how you manipulated him, seems unlikely." "Vincent, please. The only reason you're not in jail tonight is because I don't want Kyle to go through the trauma of testifying against his mother. But if you fight me on the divorce, if you try to take anything that isn't legally yours, if you even think about contacting Kyle without permission, I will make sure you face criminal charges for every crime you've committed." Vincent walked to the door, then turned back. "Brett was wrong about one thing, Diane. This isn't about you serving your purpose and it being time to move on. This is about consequences for betrayal. And I never forget, and I never forgive." As he left his former wife sobbing in the study, Vincent felt no satisfaction, only the cold completion of a necessary task. Some people called him ruthless. Vincent called it loyalty to the family that remained. Upstairs, Kyle was waiting in his room. "Is it over, Dad?" "It's over," Vincent confirmed. "Tomorrow, it'll just be us." Kyle nodded, relief flooding his features. "Good. I never want to see her again." Vincent understood that sentiment completely. Some betrayals were too deep for forgiveness, even from family. Especially from family. Chapter 6. No Mercy. Wednesday morning, Vincent woke at 5 a.m. to find Diane's side of the bed empty. He discovered her in the kitchen, fully dressed with a suitcase by the door, staring out the window with hollow eyes. She'd aged a decade in the past week. Her perfect composure finally shattered beyond repair. "I was hoping we could talk before Kyle wakes up," she said without turning around. Vincent poured himself coffee, noting how his soon-to-be ex-wife flinched at the sound of the mug hitting the counter. "What's left to say? I want to explain." "You want to manipulate," Vincent corrected. "It's what you've always done, Diane. The difference is now I see it for what it is." She turned to face him, and Vincent was struck by how much he'd once loved this woman. The realization brought no softness, only a bitter acknowledgement of time wasted on someone unworthy of loyalty. "I never meant for Kyle to get hurt," Diane said. "The medication was just supposed to keep him calm. You drugged my son. Vincent's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. You turned him into your accomplice in stealing from his own family. You made him lie to me for months. And when your plan started falling apart, you nearly got him killed. It was Brett's idea. Vincent slammed his mug down hard enough to crack it. Stop blaming others. The kitchen fell silent, except for the coffee dripping from the fractured mug onto the granite counter. Vincent's fury was controlled but absolute, and for the first time, Diane seemed to truly understand what she'd awakened. You made choices, Vincent continued. Every text to Brett, every lie to Kyle, every dollar you stole, every pill you gave our son. Those were your choices, Diane. Own them. Kyle appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with remarkable composure for a 17-year-old who'd just learned his mother was a stranger. I heard voices, Kyle said quietly. Is she leaving? Vincent nodded. Say whatever you need to say to your mother. This is the last conversation you'll have in this house. Kyle studied Diane for a long moment, and Vincent saw his son's natural compassion warring with justified anger. Finally, Kyle spoke. I hope someday you understand what you threw away. Kyle, please. Diane stepped toward her son. I love you. Everything I did was because. Everything you did was selfish. Kyle interrupted, his voice steady but cold. Dad would have died for me. You were willing to let me die for money. The truth of those words hit Diane like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, reaching for the counter to steady herself. That's not. I would never. She started, but the words died as she met Kyle's eyes. Her son was looking at her the way Vincent now looked at her, with the kind of disappointment that burned deeper than hate. Vincent's phone buzzed. Tommy Rodriguez. Package delivered to her lawyer's office. Divorce papers, restraining order, and criminal evidence file. She'll get copies when she tries to leave the state. Vincent had anticipated that Diane might try to flee once she realized the scope of his knowledge. The restraining order would keep her within jurisdiction while the divorce proceeded, and the criminal evidence file would ensure her lawyer understood the consequences of fighting the settlement terms. There's a car waiting outside, Vincent told Diane. It'll take you to the hotel room I've arranged. You have 3 days to find permanent housing before the temporary arrangement expires. Vincent, I don't have any money. You should have thought about that before you try to steal mine. His tone carried no sympathy. David Kim will contact you about allowed access to marital assets for basic living expenses. But the house, the businesses, Kyle's college fund, all of that stays where it belongs. Diane picked up her suitcase with shaking hands. At the door, she turned back one final time. I know you'll never forgive me, but someday you might understand that people make mistakes when they're hurting. People make choices, Vincent replied. You chose Brett over Kyle. You chose money over family. You chose manipulation over honesty. Now you get to live with those choices. Kyle walked over and stood next to his father, presenting a united front that made Diane's abandonment complete. The son she'd thought she could manipulate had become the man Vincent had raised him to be, loyal, honest, and strong enough to reject toxicity even when it came from someone he'd once loved. After Diane left, Vincent and Kyle stood in the sudden quiet of their house. The absence felt different than when Diane traveled for work. This was permanent, final, the closing of a chapter that had nearly destroyed their family. Do you think she'll try to come back? Kyle asked. Not if she's smart, Vincent replied. But intelligence was never your mother's strongest quality. Vincent's phone rang. Marcus Chin's voice was crisp and professional. Target acquired at hotel. Surveillance in place. She's made 6 calls to Brett's voicemail and 2 attempts to contact lawyers in other states. Let her try, Vincent said. Every lawyer she calls will receive the evidence file within an hour. Word travels fast in legal circles about clients who commit crimes against children. The next few days passed in a strange calm. Kyle returned to school, where news of his parents' separation was met with the usual teenage gossip and drama. But Vincent had prepared for this too. Isabella Santos had briefed Kyle on how to handle questions about his mother without revealing the full scope of her betrayal. People will ask, she'd told Kyle during one of their sessions. Just say your parents are getting divorced and you're living with your dad. Don't give details about the theft or manipulation. Let the adults handle the legal consequences. Kyle had proved surprisingly adept at managing the social pressure. Vincent suspected his son had inherited more than just his height and build. The boy had a natural ability to compartmentalize trauma and focus on what mattered, traits that would serve him well in life. Friday evening brought the call Vincent had been expecting. David Kim, she's hired a lawyer. Jonathan Pierce from downtown. He's reputation for taking difficult cases, but he's also smart enough to recognize when his client doesn't have leverage. What's Pierce's angle? Custody. He's going to argue that keeping Kyle from his mother is cruel and unusual, especially given the boy's recent trauma. He'll claim you're using the situation to poison Kyle against Diane. Vincent smiled coldly. Let him try. Kyle's old enough to speak for himself in court, and he knows exactly what his mother did to him. Vincent, David's voice carried a warning. Pierce is good at emotional manipulation with juries. He'll paint Diane as a woman who made mistakes but deserves redemption. He'll make you look controlling and vindictive. Then we'll give him something more substantial to worry about. That night, Vincent activated the final phase of his plan. Marcus released carefully edited portions of the surveillance footage to Diane's lawyer, just enough to show her drugging Kyle, planning theft, and manipulating the boy against his father. The full footage remained sealed, but these excerpts would be enough to make Pierce understand that fighting Vincent Torres was a losing proposition. The message was clear. Vincent had evidence of multiple felonies, and he was prepared to use it if Diane didn't accept the divorce terms quietly. By Monday morning, Pierce had called David Kim to discuss settlement options. The war was over. Vincent had won completely, ruthlessly, and without mercy. But as he watched Kyle leave for school that morning, Vincent knew the victory was hollow. He'd saved his son and protected his family's future, but the cost had been 20 years of shared history and the idealistic belief that love could overcome any obstacle. Still, some prices were worth paying. Some betrayals demanded absolute consequences. And Vincent Torres never forgot and never forgave. Chapter 7. The Final Judgment. 2 weeks after Diane's departure, Vincent sat in David Kim's conference room reviewing the final divorce settlement. The terms were exactly what he demanded. Full custody of Kyle, complete control of all family assets, and a restraining order preventing Diane from contacting either of them without court approval. She signed everything, David reported. Pierce convinced her that fighting would only result in criminal charges. She gets minimal spousal support, barely enough for basic living expenses, and supervised visitation with Kyle once per month if he agrees to it. Has Kyle indicated whether he wants to see her? He's been clear. No contact until he's 18 and can make that decision as an adult. David closed the file. Honestly, Vincent, I've never seen such a complete victory in a contested divorce. Most judges would have given her something. Vincent's expression remained neutral. Most wives don't commit felonies against their own children. What David didn't know was that Vincent had provided additional incentive for Diane's cooperation. Marcus had made sure she understood that Brett Hutchinson was now under federal investigation for multiple crimes across 3 states, including identity theft, drug trafficking, and manipulation of minors. If Diane fought the divorce, her connection to Brett's criminal enterprise would be thoroughly examined by federal prosecutors. The choice had been simple: accept Vincent's terms or risk spending the next decade in federal prison. That afternoon, Vincent found Kyle in his room studying, textbooks spread across the desk in the same methodical arrangement Vincent used for mission planning. The boy had adapted to their new normal with remarkable resilience, but Vincent knew the trauma ran deeper than Kyle's composed exterior suggested. How are you doing with all this? Vincent asked, settling into the chair beside Kyle's desk. Kyle looked up from his calculus homework. Relieved, mostly. Is that terrible? No, it's honest. Vincent studied his son's face, seeing his own features reflected back. The steady gaze, the controlled composure, the intelligence that missed very little. You don't owe her forgiveness, Kyle. Not now, maybe not ever. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel bad about choosing you over her, Kyle admitted. But then I remember how she looked at me in the hospital, like I was just a tool she was worried about losing. Vincent's jaw tightened. Even now, weeks later, The memory of Diane's manipulation made his anger burn cold and bright. Your mother made her choices, Vincent said. She chose Brett over our family. She chose money over your safety. She chose manipulation over love. Those choices have consequences. Kyle nodded, then asked the question Vincent had been dreading. Do you think she ever really loved us? Vincent considered lying, offering the comfortable fiction that Diane had simply lost her way. But Kyle deserved the truth, even when it hurt. I think she loved the idea of us, Vincent said carefully. The status, the security, the image of the perfect family. But real love doesn't endanger the people you claim to care about. Real love doesn't manipulate children or betray trust. What we have is real love. Kyle asked. What we have is loyalty, Vincent replied. Trust, respect. Those things matter more than sentiment, Kyle. They're what hold families together when everything else falls apart. That evening, Vincent received an unexpected call from Tommy Rodriguez. You need to see this, Tommy said, his voice tight with controlled anger. 20 minutes later, Tommy arrived with a tablet displaying social media posts. Diane had created new accounts and was posting carefully crafted messages about her abusive husband who had stolen her son and destroyed her life over a simple misunderstanding. The posts were masterfully manipulative, painting herself as the victim of a controlling spouse who couldn't forgive one mistake. She'd even posted old photos of Kyle in the hospital, suggesting Vincent had somehow caused the accident. She's got sympathetic responses from dozens of people, Tommy reported. Classic victim narrative. Evil husband, innocent wife, poor child caught in the middle. Vincent scrolled through the comments, noting how Diane had carefully omitted any mention of Brett, the theft, or the drugs. To casual observers, she looked like a heartbroken mother fighting for access to her son. Want me to release the real story? Tommy asked. I can have a full evidence package online in an hour. Vincent considered it. The footage of Diane drugging Kyle, the recorded conversations about stealing Vincent's money, the text messages manipulating their son, all of it would destroy her victim narrative completely. But it would also subject Kyle to public scrutiny and judgment. The boy had been through enough without having his mother's crimes become internet entertainment. No, Vincent decided. Kyle doesn't need the world knowing what she did to him. Let her play victim to strangers. The people who matter know the truth. What if she escalates, starts doing interviews, maybe approaches Kyle at school? Vincent's smile was arctic. Then we remind her why that would be a mistake. The reminder came in the form of a simple message sent to Diane's new phone. A single photo of Brett Hutchinson in federal custody, arrested on charges that would keep him in prison for the next 15 years. The image was accompanied by a brief text. Keep our son's name out of your mouth, or join Brett in federal court. Diane's social media posts stopped immediately. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Vincent answered the door to find Diane's sister, Rebecca, standing on his porch with an expression of barely controlled fury. You bastard, Rebecca said without preamble. Diane told me what you did to her. Vincent stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. What exactly did she tell you? That you threw her out over some imaginary affair. That you're keeping Kyle from seeing his mother. That you've stolen everything she's entitled to after 20 years of marriage. Vincent led Rebecca to the living room, where Kyle was reading on the couch. The teenager looked up at his aunt with polite indifference. Another relationship casualty of Diane's betrayal. Kyle, Vincent said calmly, your aunt thinks I'm preventing you from seeing your mother. Would you like to explain the situation? Kyle closed his book and looked directly at Rebecca. Mom drugged me before I got on my motorcycle. She was using me to steal Dad's money with her boyfriend. She nearly got me killed because she needed me compliant for their theft. I choose not to see her because she's dangerous. Rebecca's anger deflated like a punctured balloon. That can't be. Diane would never. Vincent pulled out his phone and played 30 seconds of recorded conversation. Diane and Brett discussing how much money they could steal before disappearing with Kyle. Rebecca's face went white as she heard her sister's voice planning to kidnap her own son. Diane has always been a master manipulator, Vincent said quietly. She's convinced you that she's the victim here. But the truth is, she endangered Kyle for money and betrayed 20 years of marriage for a man who abandoned her the moment things got difficult. Rebecca looked between Vincent and Kyle, seeing the solid bond between father and son that Diane's betrayal had only strengthened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." "Now you do," Vincent replied. "And now you understand why there's no reconciliation coming. Some actions can't be forgiven or forgotten." After Rebecca left, Vincent found Kyle back in his room, staring out the window with a thoughtful expression. "You okay?" Vincent asked. "Yeah," Kyle said. "It's just seeing Aunt Rebecca believe Mom's lies reminded me how good Mom was at making people think she was the victim. She almost had me convinced that helping her was the right thing to do." Vincent sat on the edge of Kyle's bed. "Manipulation is a powerful weapon, son. Your mother used it for years to get what she wanted. The key is recognizing it so you never fall victim to it again. How do you recognize it? Watch what people do, not what they say. Your mother said she loved us, but she endangered you for money. Brett said he cared about your mom, but he abandoned her when things got difficult. Actions reveal character, Kyle. Always trust actions over words." Kyle nodded, filing away another lesson in reading people and protecting himself from those who would use him. Vincent looked at his son, intelligent, resilient, loyal despite everything he'd been through, and felt a fierce pride. Diane and Brett had tried to break their family, to turn Kyle against his father and steal everything Vincent had built. Instead, they'd only made the Torres family stronger. But the war wasn't quite over yet. Chapter 8, The Hunt continues. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Vincent received intelligence that changed everything. Marcus Chun called with news that made Vincent's blood run cold. Brett Hutchinson had been released on bail pending trial and had violated the terms of his release by crossing state lines. "He's headed back this direction," Marcus reported. "Tracked his car through 3 states before he went dark. Last confirmed sighting was 2 hours from your location." Vincent immediately activated the security protocols he'd hoped never to use. Within an hour, armed security was positioned around Kyle's school. Their house was under discreet surveillance, and every electronic device was monitored for potential threats. "Why would he come back?" Kyle asked when Vincent explained the situation that evening. "He has to know you're watching for him." "Because he's desperate," Vincent replied, checking the locks on all windows and doors. A ritual that would have seemed paranoid to most people, but was second nature to a man who'd spent decades protecting high-value targets. Federal charges mean serious prison time. He's probably thinking that if he can get leverage over us, he might be able to negotiate a better deal. What Vincent didn't tell Kyle was that Brett's pattern of behavior suggested something more dangerous: revenge. Men like Brett, when cornered, often lashed out at those they blamed for their downfall. And Brett had plenty of reason to blame the Torres family for destroying his plans. The call came at 2 a.m. Vincent's secure phone displayed an unknown number, but the voice that answered was familiar. "Hello, Vincent." Brett's voice carried a new edge, the desperate confidence of a man with nothing left to lose. "We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss." Vincent was already moving through the house, checking on Kyle and activating additional security measures. "I think we do. See, I've been thinking about our conversation at the park, about how you destroyed my life, turned Diane against me, and made sure I'd lose everything. You destroyed your own life when you decided to manipulate children and steal from their families." Brett's laugh was harsh and bitter, righteous as always. "But here's the thing, Vincent, I know things about your business that your government clients wouldn't appreciate. Illegal surveillance, unauthorized operations, activities that would violate about a dozen federal laws." Vincent's voice remained calm, but his hand moved to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. "Are you threatening me, Brett? I'm offering you a deal. $5 million, and all the evidence I've gathered disappears. Refuse, and I start making phone calls to very interested parties. You're bluffing. You don't have access to my business files. Don't I?" Brett's voice carried the smugness that Vincent remembered from their first confrontation. "Diane was very helpful in documenting your activities. Photos, financial records, client information. She was quite thorough." Vincent's jaw tightened. Even now, months after her banishment, Diane was still causing damage. The intelligence she'd gathered for Brett represented years of sensitive operations, client identities, and classified methodologies that could destroy Vincent's business and land him in federal prison. "You have 24 hours, Brett continued. "I'll call tomorrow night with instructions for the money transfer. And Vincent, if anything happens to me, if I have an accident or disappear, that information gets released automatically." The line went dead. Vincent immediately called his team. Within minutes, his house was surrounded by enough firepower to stop a small army, and Kyle was relocated to a secure safe house that Vincent maintained for exactly this type of emergency. "He's got Diane's intelligence package," Vincent told Tommy Rodriguez during their emergency briefing. "Photos, documents, maybe even recordings. Everything she collected over the past year." "How much damage could it do?" Isabella Santos asked. "Complete destruction," Vincent replied grimly. "Client identities, operational details, financial structures. Everything needed to dismantle my business and implicate me in activities that don't officially exist." Marcus Chun was already working his keyboard, tracking Brett's movements through digital breadcrumbs and financial transactions. He's staying mobile, using cash, avoiding cameras. Professional-level evasion tactics. He learned from watching us, Vincent realized. Diane documented our methods, and Brett's been studying them for months. David Kim's voice was tense over the secure connection. "Vincent, if he releases that information, we're looking at federal charges for everyone involved. RICO violations, espionage charges, unauthorized foreign operations. This goes way beyond divorce court." Vincent felt the familiar calm that settled over him during crisis situations. Brett had made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened Vincent's family and business simultaneously. That made him an enemy combatant, not a civilian problem. "Tommy, I need a clean team. No connections to our official operations." "Vincent," Isabella warned, "whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking that Brett Hutchinson has violated his bail, crossed state lines with intent to commit extortion, and threatened a minor." Vincent's voice carried the cold authority of his military days. "That makes him a fugitive actively endangering my family. The legal system will take months to locate and prosecute him. In the meantime, he's free to release classified information or take direct action against Kyle." Vincent's decision was made. Some threats require immediate resolution. Vincent had spent decades operating in the gray areas between legal and necessary. Protecting his family and preserving national security sometimes required actions that wouldn't be approved in a courtroom. Brett had chosen to play in that arena when he threatened to expose classified operations. "Marcus, I need everything you can find on Brett's location, associates, and resources." "Tommy, assemble a tracking team. Former military only, people who understand operational security." "Isabella, I need a psychological profile on Brett's likely actions and timeline." As his team dispersed to execute their assignments, Vincent allowed himself a moment of bitter satisfaction. Brett thought he was playing chess with a businessman. He was about to discover he'd declared war on a predator. Kyle called from the safe house, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" "I'm going to handle this, son." Brett made the mistake of threatening our family twice. He won't get a third chance. "What about Mom? If Brett has her information?" Vincent had been wondering the same thing. Diane's cooperation in gathering intelligence made her either a willing accomplice or a potential victim, depending on Brett's current disposition toward his former lover. "Your mother made her choices," Vincent said. "Now she gets to live with the consequences, whatever they are." The hunt for Brett Hutchinson had begun, and this time, Vincent Torres wasn't planning to offer mercy or second chances. Some enemies were too dangerous to leave alive. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. The end came 18 hours later, in a warehouse district 40 miles outside the city. Marcus had tracked Brett through a series of digital breadcrumbs, credit card usage at gas stations, cell phone towers, and ATM transactions that painted a clear picture of his movements. Brett was good at evasion, but Vincent's team was better at hunting. They found Brett and Diane together in a rundown motel, both of them looking like they'd aged years in the past few months. The reunion between the former lovers hadn't been romantic, Surveillance footage showed Brett grabbing Diane roughly and demanding the additional intelligence files she'd hidden from him during their original operation. Vincent watched the confrontation through Marcus's hidden cameras, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction as he witnessed Brett's true nature finally revealed to Diane. The man she betrayed her family for was now threatening her with the same violence he'd once promised to protect her from. "She looks terrified," Isabella observed, studying Diane's body language on the monitors. "Good," Vincent replied without emotion. Now she knows what Kyle felt when they were manipulating him. The operation began at 3 a.m. Vincent's team moved with military precision, surrounding the motel and cutting off all escape routes. Tommy and Marcus handled the technical aspects, disabling security cameras, jamming communications, and ensuring no record of their presence would survive. Vincent himself took point, the role he'd always preferred when absolute certainty was required. Brett was awake when Vincent entered the room, sitting by the window with a laptop and what appeared to be a dead man's switch connected to several online servers. Diane lay on the bed, her wrists zip-tied and duct tape over her mouth. Apparently, Brett had decided she was more liability than asset. "Vincent," Brett said without turning around. "Right on time. I was just preparing to upload some very interesting files about your business operations." "The $5 million wasn't enough?" Vincent asked, noting the positions of weapons and potential threats with automatic assessment. This was never about money. Brett finally faced him, and Vincent saw the desperate fury of a man who'd lost everything and wanted to take others down with him. "This was about showing you that you're not untouchable, that your perfect control has limits." Vincent stepped further into the room, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. "You could have taken a plea deal, served you time quietly, been forgotten, and let you win." Brett's laugh was bitter and unhinged. "You destroyed my life, turned Diane against me, and made sure I'd lose everything I'd worked for. Now I get to return the favor. Diane turned against you because you abandoned her," Vincent pointed out. "I just gave her the information to make an informed choice." Brett's finger hovered over the laptop's enter key. "Say goodbye to your business, Vincent, and to your freedom. These files will have federal agents knocking down your door within hours." "No, they won't." The voice came from behind Brett, Marcus Chun, who'd entered through the bathroom window while Vincent held Brett's attention. The laptop disappeared from Brett's hands so quickly he didn't have time to react. The files were already encrypted and deleted from the servers 6 hours ago, Marcus explained calmly. "Your dead man's switch was connected to empty directories." Brett's composure finally shattered completely. "That's impossible. I had backups, multiple servers." "You had copies of what we wanted you to have," Vincent said. "Diane's intelligence gathering was good, but she never had access to our actual operational files. Everything she copied was carefully curated misinformation." The truth hit Brett like a physical blow. For months, he'd been planning revenge using false intelligence that Vincent's team had fed him through Diane's unknowing cooperation. His ultimate weapon was worthless. "You played me," Brett whispered. "I played you from the moment you threatened my son," Vincent confirmed. "Every move you've made, every plan you've developed, every piece of evidence you thought you had, all of it was designed to bring you to exactly this moment." Vincent looked at Diane, still bound on the bed, her eyes wide with terror and understanding. She was finally seeing the complete scope of Vincent's capabilities and realizing that her betrayal had been doomed from the beginning. "The federal charges against you are real," Vincent continued, addressing Brett. "The evidence of your crimes is legitimate. Your bail violation and extortion attempt tonight just added to your sentence." Tommy appeared in the doorway, reporting that local police were en route, called anonymously about a domestic disturbance at the motel. "Time to go," Marcus advised. Vincent looked at Brett one final time. "You made this personal when you endangered Kyle. Everything that happens next is the consequence of that choice." As sirens approached in the distance, Vincent's team vanished as efficiently as they'd arrived. Brett would be returned to federal custody, his bail revoked, facing additional charges that would ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison. The evidence of his extortion attempt and kidnapping of Diane would be discovered by the responding officers, along with enough documentation to connect him to multiple federal crimes across several states. Diane would be questioned as a potential victim, though her cooperation in Brett's criminal activities would eventually surface during the investigation. Vincent had ensured that her role in gathering intelligence would be treated as coercion rather than willing participation. He had no desire to see Kyle's mother imprisoned, merely neutralized as a threat. The next morning, Vincent sat in his kitchen drinking coffee and reading news reports about Brett Hutchinson's arrest. The man who'd threatened his family was now facing multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. Justice had been served, though not through traditional legal channels. Kyle returned from the safe house that afternoon, his bags packed and his expression relieved. "Is it really over?" "It's over," Vincent confirmed. "Brett will never threaten anyone again." "What about Mom?" Vincent had been dreading this question. "Your mother will probably face some legal consequences for her cooperation with Brett, but nothing that threatens her freedom. She made terrible choices, but she's still your mother." Kyle nodded thoughtfully. "Will she try to contact us?" "I doubt it. She knows the conditions of the restraining order, and I think recent events have made her understand the consequences of crossing those boundaries." That evening, Vincent received a single text message from an unknown number. "I understand now. I won't contact Kyle again. I'm sorry." Vincent deleted the message without responding. Diane's apology was too little, too late, and came only after she'd seen the full extent of the consequences for her actions. But it confirmed what Vincent had hoped, that she finally understood the finality of her situation. 2 weeks later, Kyle received notification that he'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, his academic achievements untainted by the family drama of the past year. As Vincent watched his son read the acceptance letter, he felt the deep satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Brett Hutchinson was serving multiple life sentences in federal prison. Diane had relocated across the country and signed a legal agreement never to contact Kyle without explicit permission from both father and son. The family business was stronger than ever, with new security protocols preventing future infiltration. Kyle was thriving academically and personally, his natural resilience strengthened by surviving his mother's betrayal. Vincent had protected his family, preserved his business, and eliminated all threats with surgical precision. Some might call his methods extreme, but Vincent called them effective. That night, as he checked the locks and security systems one final time, a ritual that would continue for the rest of his life, Vincent reflected on the lessons of the past year. Trust was earned through actions, not words. Family loyalty was precious precisely because it was fragile, and some betrayals were so fundamental that they destroyed not just relationships, but the people who committed them. Vincent Torres never forgot and never forgave, but he protected what mattered with absolute ruthlessness. Kyle was safe. The family was secure. Justice had been served. It was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Ice Cream and Insignias. Victor Wolf had seen combat in 3 countries, survived 2 IED blasts, and earned a chest full of ribbons most soldiers only dreamed about. But nothing in his 12 years of service prepared him for the sight of a 6-year-old girl sitting alone by Fort Bragg's East Gate, tears streaming down her face as the North Carolina sun beat down mercilessly. It was supposed to be a routine training day. Victor's unit, the 3rd Special Forces Group, was running live-fire exercises in the southern sector. He'd volunteered to grab supplies from the main depot, driving solo in a beat-up Humvee that had seen better decades. The girl appeared like a mirage in his peripheral vision. Pink dress, scraped knees, clutching a stuffed elephant like it was the last solid thing in her world. Victor pulled over without thinking. Combat had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being screamed that this wasn't right. "Hey there," he said, crouching down at her level, careful to keep his distance. He knew how scary a 6'2" soldier in full BDUs could look to a kid. "You okay?" The girl hiccuped, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I can't find my mommy. Victor glanced around. The gate was heavily monitored, but this section was technically outside the main security perimeter, a small parking area where families sometimes waited. No other adults in sight. His jaw tightened. What kind of parent loses track of their kid on a military base? All right, what's your name? Summer, she whispered, hugging her elephant tighter. Summer. Victor filed that away. Well, Summer, I'm Victor. I'm going to help you find your mom, okay? But first, he pulled out his wallet. Have you had lunch? She shook her head. 20 minutes later, they sat outside the PX, Summer working through her second ice cream cone, while Victor made discreet inquiries. The base wasn't on lockdown, which meant this wasn't a security threat. Just a scared kid and probably a panicked parent. He called the MPs, but they were dealing with an incident at the airfield. Standard protocol said to wait, but Victor had always been better at breaking protocol than following it. My mommy works in the big building, Summer offered between licks, chocolate smearing her chin. The one with all the flags. Victor's eyes narrowed. The big building with flags. That was Headquarters Battalion, where colonels and generals shuffled papers and made decisions that sent men like him into hell. Interesting. Does your mommy wear a uniform? He asked carefully. Summer nodded enthusiastically. Like yours, but with more shiny stuff. More shiny stuff. Officer territory. Victor felt a headache coming on. Losing a kid was bad enough. Losing an officer's kid was career suicide for whoever was supposed to be watching her. He pulled out his phone, took a photo of Summer with her elephant, and sent it to his buddy in the admin building with a simple message. Kid lost near East Gate. Mom works HQ Battalion. Female officer. Help. The response came back in 30 seconds. Holy shit, Wolf. That's General Thomas's daughter. Stay put. Victor's blood went cold. Not just any officer. A general. He looked down at Summer, who was now using her stuffed elephant to create an elaborate story about ice cream kingdoms. Lieutenant General Diane Thomas. He'd never met her personally, but everyone knew the name. The Army's rising star, youngest three-star in recent history, rumored to be on track for a fourth. She'd made her bones in intelligence operations, then transitioned to Special Operations Command. Word was she'd personally authorized 3 of the most successful raids in the past 5 years. And Victor had just bought her daughter ice cream while she was apparently missing. Summer. A woman's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade, sharp, controlled, but with an undercurrent of barely contained panic. Victor stood as Diane Thomas rounded the corner at a pace just shy of running. She wore her ACUs with the precision of someone who'd never had a wrinkle in her life, 3 stars gleaming on her chest. But her face, that was pure mother, fear and relief warring across features that probably intimidated half the Pentagon. Mommy! Summer launched herself forward, and Diane dropped to her knees, crushing her daughter against her chest. Victor stood at attention, feeling simultaneously like he'd done something heroic and something that would end his career. You didn't just casually hang out with a general's kid eating ice cream without permission forms in triplicate. Diane's eyes met his over Summer's head. You found her. She found me, ma'am. Near the East Gate. The general's jaw tightened. Someone was going to pay for this security lapse, and Victor was glad it wouldn't be him. Diane stood. Summer perched on her hip and extended her hand. Victor shook it. Firm grip, calluses that said she wasn't just a desk officer. Sergeant Wolf, she said, reading his name tape. What unit? 3rd Special Forces Group, ma'am. Alpha Company. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Calculation? Hard to say. And you just happened to find my daughter? Wrong place, right time, ma'am. Victor kept his voice neutral. I was heading to depot. Saw her crying. Rest was just common sense and ice cream. A ghost of a smile crossed Diane's face. She does love ice cream. Then, more seriously, I owe you one, Sergeant. No debt, ma'am. Just glad she's safe. Diane studied him for a long moment, and Victor had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed by someone who'd spent years evaluating assets and threats. Finally, she nodded. What's your unit number? Victor rattled it off, still not sure if this was going to end well or badly. Thank you again, Sergeant Wolf. Diane shifted Summer in her arms. I won't forget this. As she walked away, Victor watched them go, feeling like he'd just stepped onto a chessboard without knowing the rules. In his experience, generals didn't forget debts. The question was whether this would turn out to be a blessing or a curse. Chapter 2. The Briefing Room. 7 days later, Victor sat in a classified briefing room he didn't even know existed, staring at maps of places he'd never been deployed and wondering what the hell he'd done to deserve this. The summons had come through official channels. A sealed envelope hand-delivered by an aide who looked like he could kill you with a stapler. No explanation. Just coordinates, a time, and a security clearance requirement that made Victor's current level look like a library card. Major Bradford Maxwell sat at the head of the conference table, all pressed uniforms and perfectly coiffed hair that probably cost more than Victor's monthly salary. Harvard ROTC pedigree, fast-tracked through every soft posting the Army offered, and currently serving as General Thomas's chief operations officer. Victor had done his homework after getting the summons. Maxwell was everything Victor wasn't: connected, political, and more comfortable in a suit than combat gear. Sergeant Wolf. Maxwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for joining us. I understand you've met General Thomas. Briefly, sir. Yes. The ice cream incident. Maxwell's tone made it sound like Victor had been caught committing a federal offense. Quite the fortuitous encounter. The door opened before Victor could respond. Diane Thomas entered, and every soldier in the room snapped to attention. She waved them down, moving to the front of the room with the efficiency of someone who valued every second. At ease. Sergeant Wolf, you're probably wondering why you're here. The thought crossed my mind, ma'am. A flicker of amusement. I've been reviewing personnel files for a special assignment. Your name came up. Bradford Maxwell shifted almost imperceptibly, but Victor caught it. Interesting. Diane continued. We're establishing a new joint task force. Small team, highly specialized, focused on counterintelligence operations in Southeast Asia. I need operators who can think on their feet, adapt to changing circumstances, and, she paused meaningfully, make the right call when protocol doesn't apply. Victor's pulse quickened. This was the kind of assignment people killed for. Literally. Major Maxwell has been compiling a list of candidates, Diane said. I'm adding you to that list. Maxwell's jaw tightened microscopically. General, with respect, Sergeant Wolf's record shows excellent tactical performance, but this operation requires someone who helped my daughter without asking what was in it for him. Diane's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Someone who saw a problem, assessed the situation, and took appropriate action without waiting for someone to tell him what to do. Yes, Major. That's exactly what this operation requires. Victor suddenly understood the temperature in the room. Maxwell had his own candidates, probably people who'd scratch his back if he scratched theirs. Victor's unexpected addition upset carefully laid plans. You'll undergo additional screening, Diane continued. Psych eval, advanced security clearance, the works. But I want you on this team, Sergeant. The official briefing starts in 3 weeks. Questions? No, ma'am. Dismissed. Victor stood, saluted, and made it exactly 2 steps toward the door before Maxwell's voice stopped him. Sergeant. A word. Diane had already left. Victor turned back to face the major, who'd stood and was buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. You got lucky with the kid, Maxwell said quietly. Don't mistake luck for merit. Wasn't aware I had, sir. This task force is critical to national security. The general may see something in you, but I don't. You're a grunt who happened to be in the right place. That doesn't make you special operations material. Victor held his gaze. With respect, sir, my 12 years of service and 3 combat deployments might disagree. Maxwell's smile was thin and cold. Combat experience doesn't mean you understand the complexities of intelligence work. This isn't kicking down doors and shooting bad guys. This is nuanced, strategic, above your pay grade. Then I guess I'll have to learn, sir. See that you do, because if you screw this up, it won't just be your career that suffers. It'll be mine, and the general's. And I won't let some ice cream hero derail years of planning because he thinks he's earned something. Victor left the briefing room with a knot in his gut. He'd made an enemy today, and not just any enemy. One with rank, connections, and a personal grudge. In his experience, those were the most dangerous kind. Chapter 3. The Setup. 3 weeks felt like 3 months. Victor passed every screening with flying colors. Psych eval came back clean. His security clearance bumped up to levels that required its own classified paperwork, and his performance reviews suddenly got very interested eyes from very important people. But it wasn't smooth sailing. Equipment went missing during training exercises. Gear he'd personally checked and secured. Reports he'd filed got lost in the system, only to reappear with subtle alterations that made him look sloppy. Small things, deniable things, the kind of harassment that couldn't be proven but was definitely intentional. Victor knew who was behind it. Bradford Maxwell played his political games with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, but enough plausible deniability that actually proving anything was impossible. The real problem came 2 days before the official task force deployment briefing. Victor returned to his barracks after a nighttime training run to find Quentin Howell, Maxwell's right-hand man and a captain with the personality of a used car salesman, sitting on his bunk, holding Victor's personal laptop. "Evening, Sergeant," Howell said, not bothering to stand. "Hope you don't mind. I was just conducting a routine security check." Victor's blood pressure spiked. "That requires authorization, sir." "Which I have." Howell held up a paper, signed by Major Maxwell himself. "We take security very seriously for this operation. Can't have any loose ends. Find anything interesting?" Victor kept his voice level, but his mind raced. There was nothing on that laptop that could hurt him. He wasn't stupid enough to keep anything sensitive on personal equipment, but the invasion of privacy, the clear message that Maxwell could reach into any part of his life, was unmistakable. "Nothing yet." Howell closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. "But you know how these things go. Sometimes things turn up in the most unexpected places. Downloaded files, suspicious communications, the kind of thing that would be really unfortunate right before a major deployment." The threat was clear as day. If you're going to plant something, Captain, you might want to be more subtle about the threat. Howell's smile was reptilian. "Plant something? Sergeant, I'm shocked you'd suggest such a thing. I'm just doing my job, making sure everyone on this task force is exactly who they say they are." He stood, still holding the laptop. "I'll return this once the analysis is complete. Should be about 48 hours, right around the time of the final briefing." After Howell left, Victor sat in the dark, thinking. This was more than harassment now. This was a setup. Maxwell wanted him off the task force, and he was willing to fabricate evidence to make it happen. The question was, how far would they go? He pulled out his phone, his personal, encrypted phone that the Army didn't know about, and made a call. "Eugene." Victor kept his voice low. "It's Wolf. I need a favor. Big one." Eugene Wells had been Victor's team leader in Afghanistan before an injury sent him stateside and eventually into the private sector. Now he ran a small security consulting firm that catered to people who needed problems solved discreetly. "Wolf, been a while. What's cooking?" "Someone's trying to frame me. Military. High level. I need insurance." There was a pause. "You in real trouble or just paranoid?" "They took my laptop. Promised to find something incriminating in 48 hours. Eugene whistled. "That's not subtle." "All right, what do you need?" "Background on Major Bradford Maxwell. Everything. Financial records, communications, dirt. If he's coming after me, he's got vulnerabilities. I need to find them. That's gonna cost. I've got savings. This isn't about money, brother. You're talking about investigating a field-grade officer. If this goes sideways, we're both screwed. If I don't do this, I'm screwed anyway. And I didn't survive 3 tours to get taken down by some political hack with daddy issues." Eugene laughed. "There's the Wolf I remember. All right, give me 36 hours. I'll see what I can dig up." Victor ended the call and lay back on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He'd played defense long enough. Time to go on offense. Act 2, The Trap Springs. Chapter 4, False Evidence. The briefing room was packed with the task force. 12 operators, all hand-selected, all looking at Victor like he'd just tracked dog shit across a white carpet. Bradford Maxwell stood at the podium, his expression grave. "As you're all aware, security is paramount for this operation, which is why I'm deeply troubled by what her screening process uncovered. Victor's gut clenched. Here it comes. Maxwell clicked a remote, and the projection screen lit up with what looked like classified documents, file headers, security stamps, the whole 9 yards. These documents were found on Sergeant Wolf's personal laptop. Classified operational plans, unit deployments, names of covert personnel. Mutters rippled through the room. Victor felt eyes boring into him from every direction. Victor started. The evidence is conclusive, Maxwell continued, his voice carrying just the right note of disappointed authority. The metadata shows these files were accessed and stored over the past 3 weeks. The same period Sergeant Wolf was undergoing screening for this task force. Diane Thomas sat at the corner of the table, her expression unreadable. Victor looked directly at her. General, this is fabricated. I never accessed those files. I don't even have clearance for half of them. Which makes it even more concerning, Maxwell said smoothly. It suggests either a catastrophic breach of operational security or, he paused for effect, deliberate espionage. The room erupted. Espionage. The word hung in the air like poison gas. Military prison at Leavenworth kind of accusations. Career-ending, life-destroying accusations. Diane held up a hand, and the room fell silent. Major Maxwell, these are serious charges. What's your recommendation? Immediate detention pending a full investigation. Removal from the task force. Possible court-martial. Victor's mind raced. This was worse than he'd anticipated. Maxwell wasn't just trying to get him kicked off the team. He was trying to destroy him completely. The planted evidence, the espionage angle, the public humiliation. This was scorched earth. General Thomas, Victor said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. I request permission to speak. Diane nodded. Go ahead, Sergeant. 3 weeks ago, Captain Howell confiscated my laptop for what he called a routine security check. He had it for 48 hours before this briefing. That's a 48-hour window where anyone could have planted these files. That's a serious accusation, Maxwell said, but Victor caught the flicker of concern in his eyes. It's the truth, sir, and I can prove it. That was a bluff. Victor had no proof yet, but he needed to buy time. Diane leaned forward. Prove it how? The laptop has built-in diagnostics. Access logs, system timestamps, hardware identifiers. If those files were planted, the forensic evidence will show exactly when they were added and from what source. Maxwell's expression tightened. The files could have been backdated. Then let's get CID involved. Victor turned to Diane. Criminal Investigation Division has cyber forensics experts. Real ones. Let them examine everything. My laptop, my service records, my communications. If I'm guilty, I'll accept whatever punishment comes. But if I'm innocent, he looked directly at Maxwell. Then someone went to a lot of trouble to frame me. The room was silent. Diane drummed her fingers on the table, a habit Victor had noticed during their first meeting. It meant she was thinking, calculating odds, gaming out scenarios. Major Maxwell, she said finally, you're certain these files came from Sergeant Wolf's laptop? Yes, ma'am. Chain of custody was maintained throughout the screening process. Then you won't mind if CID examines both the laptop and your screening procedures? Maxwell's jaw clenched. Of course not, ma'am. Good. Sergeant Wolf, you're confined to base pending investigation. No communications with anyone outside the task force. Major, you'll cooperate fully with CID. This briefing is postponed until we get to the bottom of this. As the room emptied, Victor caught Diane's eye. She gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. Not quite trust, but not quite condemnation either. A general willing to wait for evidence before passing judgment. It was more than he could have hoped for, and less than he needed. Chapter 5, Digging Deeper. 3 days in lockdown gave Victor a lot of time to think. His barracks room became a cage. MPs posted outside like he was some kind of terrorist. The CID investigation moved at the pace of continental drift, and every hour that passed was another hour Maxwell could use to solidify his story, destroy evidence, or create new problems. But Victor hadn't been idle. Eugene Wells was good, better than good. The thumb drive that had been accidentally delivered to Victor's room, hidden in a care package from his sister, contained enough information to bury Maxwell 3 times over. Financial records showing payments from foreign defense contractors. Email correspondence that violated operational security protocols. And, most damning, a pattern of personnel recommendations that all seemed designed to benefit Maxwell's career trajectory while marginalizing anyone he saw as competition. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. This was evidence of corruption and misconduct, sure, but didn't directly prove Maxwell had planted the files on Victor's laptop. Victor needed something more, a smoking gun that tied Maxwell directly to the frame job. The answer came from an unexpected source. Private Jeffrey McNeil showed up at Victor's door on the 4th night, looking like he was about to puke. The MP on duty knew Jeffrey. They were in the same unit, and let him through for approved visitation. "Sergeant Wolf," Jeffrey said, his voice shaking. "I need to tell you something." Victor gestured him inside. "Talk. It's about your laptop." I was there when Captain Howell had it." Victor's attention sharpened. "What did you see?" "I was running errands for Major Maxwell, filing paperwork, delivering messages, that kind of grunt work. 3 nights ago, I went to the Major's office to drop off some reports. The door was closed, but I heard voices inside. Captain Howell and someone else. They were talking about planting files." "You heard them discuss planting files on my laptop?" Jeffrey nodded miserably. Howell was saying something about how the metadata would be clean, how CID wouldn't find anything suspicious. The other voice, I couldn't tell who it was, but it sounded like they were giving instructions. Technical stuff. File structures, access codes. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because it's wrong, Sergeant. I've seen your record. You're a good soldier. What they're doing..." Jeffrey shook his head. "I can't be part of it, even if it costs me my career." Victor studied the young private. Scared but sincere. This was exactly what he needed, a witness. But also exactly what would get Jeffrey destroyed if Maxwell found out. "Can you testify to CD?" I don't know. My word against a major and a captain? Who's going to believe me?" "I will. And I think General Thomas will too." Victor pulled out his encrypted phone. "I need you to write down everything you heard. Every word, every detail. And then we need to get you somewhere safe until this plays out." "Safe? Sergeant, where am I going to be safe from a major?" Victor smiled grimly. "Leave that to me." Chapter 6. The General's Decision. The CID investigation concluded on day 7 with findings that were simultaneously vindicating and infuriating. The forensic team determined that yes, classified files had been on Victor's laptop, but the metadata showed they'd been added during the 48-hour period when Captain Howell had possession of the device. Moreover, the access signatures didn't match Victor's typical usage patterns, different typing speeds, different application preferences, different network access points. In short, someone had planted the files, and that someone had access to Victor's laptop while it was in official custody. The problem was proving who. Howell denied everything. Maxwell expressed shock and disappointment that his trusted aide might be involved. And without direct evidence tying them to the plant, CID couldn't make charges stick beyond security protocol violations that would result in reprimands, not court-martials. Victor sat across from Diane Thomas in her private office, the weight of 7 days' confinement and stress pressing down on his shoulders like a rucksack full of rocks. "You were right," Diane said without preamble. "Someone tried to frame you. CID is reasonably certain it was Captain Howell, though they can't definitively prove it was done on orders from Major Maxwell." "But you know it was," Victor said. Diane's expression was carefully neutral. "What I know and what I can prove are 2 different things, Sergeant. This is the military. We operate on evidence and chain of command. My personal suspicions don't count for much without hard proof. I have proof." Victor pulled out the thumb drive Eugene had sent. "Financial irregularities. Communications that violate security protocols. A pattern of misconduct going back years. It's all here." Diane took the drive, studying it like it might explode. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" "It does if I'm going to use it. Illegally obtained evidence isn't illegal if it was obtained by a private citizen conducting research. I have a friend in the private sector. Former military. He did some digging. Victor leaned forward. General, Maxwell tried to destroy me to protect his position. How many other people has he done this to? How many other soldiers got screwed because they stood in his way? Diane was quiet for a long moment, then inserted the thumb drive into her computer. Her eyes flickered across the screen, reading fast, her expression darkening with each passing second. This is damning, she said finally. It's enough to open an investigation. It's enough to end his career. Diane ejected the drive and handed it back. But it doesn't solve our immediate problem. The task force deployment is scheduled for next week. I need an operations officer I can trust. Not Maxwell. Definitely not Maxwell. Diane stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the parade ground. I'm removing him from the task force effective immediately. Captain Howell as well. But that leaves me with a gap in leadership at a critical time. Victor sensed where this was going, but stayed silent. Your record is exceptional, Sergeant Wolf. 3 tours, multiple commendations, tactical expertise that's earned praise from every commanding officer you've served under. The only thing that's held you back from further advancement is your tendency to, she smiled slightly, color outside the lines. Some situations require creative solutions, ma'am. Agreed. Which is why I'm offering you a field commission. Lieutenant Wolf has a nice ring to it. You'd serve as my second-in-command on this task force. It's a battlefield promotion, subject to review after the operation, but it comes with full authority and responsibility. Victor's heart hammered. This was more than vindication. This was opportunity. I accept, ma'am. Good. Because we deploy in 6 days, and I need you up to speed on everything Maxwell was handling. Which means 16-hour days and crash courses in operational planning that would make your ranger training look like a vacation. Understood, ma'am. Diane extended her hand. Welcome to the team, Lieutenant. Don't make me regret this. Victor shook her hand, feeling the weight of what came next settling on his shoulders. Maxwell was out, but he wasn't down. And men like Bradford Maxwell didn't take defeat gracefully. Act 3, Reckoning. Chapter 7, Maxwell's Gambit. Victor underestimated how vindictive a cornered officer could be. The official story was that Major Maxwell had been reassigned to a logistics position in Germany, pending review of security protocol violations. A lateral move that looked like a routine rotation on paper, but everyone knew was a demotion disguised as bureaucratic shuffling. Captain Howell was similarly reassigned to a desk job at Fort Hood, about as far from special operations as you could get without leaving the military entirely. They should have been grateful. Court-martial would have ended their careers in disgrace and possibly put them in Leavenworth. Instead, they got plausible deniability and a chance to rebuild elsewhere. But Bradford Maxwell wasn't the grateful type. The first indication something was wrong came 3 days before deployment. Victor was in the task force ready room, reviewing operational plans with the team, when his phone buzzed with a message from Eugene Wells. Call me. Now. Secure line. Victor excused himself and found an empty conference room. What's wrong? Your boy Maxwell isn't going quietly. My contacts in the contracting world just flagged some concerning chatter. Seems someone's been shopping information about your task force to interested parties. Victor's blood went cold. Shopping how? Details about the operation. Personnel lists. Deployment schedules. The kind of information that could get people killed if it reaches the wrong ears. And word is, it's coming from someone with recent access to operational planning. Maxwell. That'd be my guess. He can't get you directly anymore, so he's going scorched earth. If your mission fails, if people die, it undermines General Thomas and destroys your credibility. 2 birds, 1 treasonous stone. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I'm working on it. In the meantime, you need to assume your entire operational plan is compromised. Whatever you're planning, change it. Routes, timelines, everything. Victor's mind raced through the implications. They were heading to Cambodia, a joint operation with local forces to disrupt a human trafficking network that was using old Vietnam-era tunnels to move people across borders. The mission was complex enough without assuming the enemy knew they were coming. I need everything you can get me on Maxwell's communications, Victor said. Financial transactions, phone records, email, anything that shows he's passing information. That's going to take time we might not have. Then work fast, because if he's selling out American soldiers, I'm going to make sure he pays for it. Victor returned to the ready room and pulled Diane aside. We have a problem. 20 minutes later, the entire operation was on hold while Diane made calls to people whose names were probably classified. The task force sat in confused silence, watching their brand new LT and the general have heated conversations behind closed doors. When Diane finally emerged, her expression was granite. We're moving the deployment up. We leave tonight. Everything we discussed here, routes, schedules, objectives, is now obsolete. I'll brief the new plan on the plane. General, one of the operators asked, "What's going on?" "Operational security has been compromised. We're adapting. Pack your gear. Wheels up at 2,300 hours." As the team scrambled to prepare, Victor caught Diane's eye. She jerked her head toward her office, and he followed. "Your friend Eugene came through fast," she said, closing the door. "I made some calls. NSA has been monitoring Maxwell's communications as part of the investigation. They flagged 3 encrypted emails sent to an IP address in Macau. Content suggests detailed operational intelligence being sold to a Chinese national with ties to trafficking networks. Treason, yes, but we can't arrest him yet without tipping our hand. He thinks he's safe, thinks his buyers are the only ones who know. We need to let him believe that until we have everything we need. And in the meantime, we run a different operation. One Maxwell doesn't know about. And when we succeed, when we prove his information was wrong and his betrayal was pointless, then we bring the hammer down." Victor smiled grimly. "I like the way you think, General." Chapter 8. The Cambodia Operation. The mission went sideways exactly like every good mission does. Fast, violent, and in ways the intelligence briefing never predicted. Victor's team hit the tunnels 3 hours before dawn, moving through Cambodian jungle with the silence of ghosts. The original plan had been to approach from the east and breach through a known entrance. Instead, they came from the north, using coordinates Diane had gotten from CIA asset that Maxwell never knew existed. The trafficking network was bigger than anticipated. Not just a few smugglers using old Viet Cong tunnels, but a full operation, armed guards, surveillance systems, and infrastructure that spoke to serious funding. The kind of operation that required protection, both local and international. They hit hard and fast. Flashbangs and breaching charges, then controlled chaos as Victor's team swept through the underground complex. Traffickers tried to fight back, but they were criminals, not soldiers. 3 minutes, and the entrance was secured. What they found inside turned Victor's stomach. 42 people, men, women, children, locked in makeshift cells, some for weeks based on their condition. Most were Southeast Asian, but a handful were European and American, all destined for labor camps or worse. "Jesus Christ," one of Victor's operators muttered, staring at the cages. "Get them out," Victor ordered. "Medical evac on the way. I want everyone processed and identified." While his team worked on the extraction, Victor and 2 others pushed deeper into the tunnels. According to the intelligence, there was a command center somewhere in this warren, the administrative heart of the operation. Records, communications, names of people higher up the chain. They found it in the deepest section, behind a reinforced steel door that took 3 breaching charges to open. Inside was a room that looked more like a corporate office than a smuggler's den. Computers, file cabinets, satellite communications equipment. And sitting at the desk, very calmly pointing a pistol at them, was a Chinese national named Chun Wei, who Diane's intelligence had identified as Maxwell's buyer. "Lieutenant Wolf," Chun said in perfect English. "I was told you'd be coming from the east. Change of plans." Clearly, Chen's gun didn't waver. "I paid good money for that information. I'm disappointed it was incorrect. Life's full of disappointments." "Put the gun down." "I don't think so. You see, I have a problem. If I surrender, I spend the rest of my life in a Chinese prison, assuming Beijing doesn't just execute me quietly. If I shoot you and escape, I might have a chance. You'll never make it past my team. Perhaps, but you'll be dead either way." Chen's smile was cold. "Your Major Maxwell assured me your operation was predictable. He was wrong. I wonder what else he was wrong about. Victor's mind raced through scenarios. Chen was 7 feet away, pistol aimed at Victor's center mass. 2 other operators behind Victor, flanking the door. Any sudden move, and Chen would fire. But Chen couldn't possibly escape. Even if he killed all 3 of them, the tunnels were full of American soldiers and Cambodian police. This was a dead man talking, trying to take someone down with him. Maxwell sold you out, Victor said. You know that, right? The operation was compromised because we knew he was selling information. You were bait. We wanted to catch you and everyone you work with. Chen's expression flickered. Lying won't save you. Not lying. Check your encrypted communications. The NSA has been reading every message for the past week. They know your real name, your operations in Macau, your connections to the Ministry of State Security. You're burned, Chen. Maxwell burned you when he got greedy. For a fraction of a second, Chen's eyes shifted toward the computer on his desk, the instinctive glance of a man wanting to verify a claim. It was all the opening Victor needed. He moved fast, dropping and rolling left as his operators opened fire. Chen's pistol barked twice, rounds punching into the wall where Victor had been standing. Then Chen was down, 3 bullets center mass, dead before he hit the floor. Victor stood, heart pounding, ears ringing. Secure the room. I want every piece of data pulled from those computers. They found it all. Names, payment records, trafficking routes. And buried in the encrypted communications. Every message Maxwell had sent, every piece of intelligence he'd sold, every bit of blood money he'd received in exchange for betraying his country. It was enough to bury him forever. Chapter 9. Checkmate. Bradford Maxwell was arrested at Frankfurt Airport, trying to board a flight to Dubai with a fake passport and $200,000 in cash. The FBI had been waiting for him, tipped off by NSA intercepts and the evidence Victor's team had recovered in Cambodia. The court-martial was swift and brutal. Military justice doesn't play games with treason. Maxwell tried to claim he was acting on orders, that he thought he was part of an authorized intelligence operation, but the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communications, testimony from Chun Wei's surviving associates who'd been picked up in coordinated raids across Southeast Asia. He got 20 years in Leavenworth, dishonorable discharge, and every cent of his pension stripped. His father, a retired 2-star general who'd spent his career building the family name, released a statement disowning his son entirely. Quentin Howell, faced with evidence of his participation in both the frame job and knowledge of Maxwell's treason, took a plea deal. 5 years, testifying against Maxwell, dishonorable discharge. He was already in Leavenworth, learning what happened to former officers in military prison. Victor stood on the parade ground at Fort Bragg, the North Carolina sun beating down as General Diane Thomas pinned silver bars on his collar. A full promotion to first lieutenant, no longer battlefield temporary, but permanent and earned. Your service to this nation continues to exceed expectations, Diane said formally, for the benefit of the assembled soldiers and brass watching the ceremony. Then, quieter, just for him, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting me back, ma'am. Not many soldiers would have fought back the way you did. Most would have accepted the frame, taken the discharge, moved on. Respectfully, ma'am, I'm not most soldiers. Diane smiled. No, you're definitely not. After the ceremony, Victor found a moment alone near the East Gate, the same place he'd found Summer crying 3 months ago. 3 months that had changed everything. His phone buzzed. Eugene Wells saw the news. Nice work. Beers on you when you get back stateside. Victor smiled and pocketed the phone. He'd take Eugene up on that. But first, there was work to do. The task force's mission in Cambodia had been just the beginning. They dismantled one trafficking network, but the intelligence they'd recovered pointed to 3 others. Bigger operations, deeper connections, more people who needed saving. Lieutenant Wolf? Summer's voice made him turn. She stood with her mother a few yards away, holding her stuffed elephant. Mommy says you're a hero. Victor crouched down to her level, same as he had 3 months ago. I'm just a soldier who tries to do the right thing. That's what makes someone a hero, Diane said, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. Summer wanted to give you something. A thank you. Summer held out a drawing, Stick figures done in crayon. One tall figure holding hand with a small figure, both eating ice cream cones. Above it, in careful child's handwriting, "Thank you for helping me."